So the epigraph is from Katie Cannon. Our bodies are the texts that carry the memories, and therefore remembering is no less than reincarnation. That's deep.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's my print is not too good. Here's it Lacey Abrego.
Lacey Abrego.
Right. Both boys and girls, for example, made references to the time lost and particularly to the uniqueness of a mother's love. More than one also described feeling as if they had a hole in their heart due to their mother's absence. In this way, they were always enveloped by a sense of longing. You know, the idea of having a hole in your heart. I mean, there's so much about the book that, where I would say Javier, like Javiercito, and acting like mom is Patricia, and it becomes almost real. It becomes real for her, becomes real for you. I guess the question too is like, obviously people are when people see kids suffering, it hits them a different way than it does adults. Is there something too about like, okay, someone might say, oh, Javier, he was such a great student and he was, bien portado and everything like this. Is there something that you think where sometimes people like that narrative that you're talking about, where people say like, oh, so-and-so's not outstanding, at least, on the outside, we can't see him as outstanding or her as outstanding, and maybe he's not worthy of as much respect. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I would 100% agree with you. Which, for a lot of these too, I think that the term immigrant has become, after years, decades of the coverage, that it's become a negative term to the point that the average human being, if they hear immigrant, even immigrants themselves, like I have done, you are already starting from a less than. So what if we change the word? Like literally, why don't we treat these people coming over the border as survivors?
Sure.
Capital S, right? Especially now, and I take the example that I use is the Ukraine war. People could easily, and outside of the racial aspect, you can really empathize with somebody who is fleeing a town that has been bombed. We get that. The average person, if you don't agree with that, you're a complete piece of shit.
Right.
But you're not gonna publicly say, I don't think that these people can come in, because they literally just lost everything. They have survived something.
Sure.
Similarly, these people, they're not surviving bombs, they're surviving bullets, they're surviving poverty, they're surviving extreme hunger, X, Y, and Z. If we just refer to them with the same words outside of the R word, which is refugee, because refugee, that gets into the debate: are they actual refugees? Are they not?
Right.
Point blank, they're just surviving something as well.
Yeah. Words matter, right?
I think that they do, and I think that could create more empathy, and it gets harder to dismiss. Similarly, I think that people can read my book because it's a kid telling it.
Yes.
It is so easy for humans to disregard other adults or people that we perceive as adults, and that's a different conversation if and of itself. But in the immigration system, and I would go as far as say that Americans are so obsessed with helping kids, but the moment that, legally speaking, that kid becomes an adult, which in the immigration system is 18 and 1 minute old.
Okay.
If there's an immigrant at the border, he's 17 and 364 days old, 23 hours and 59 minutes old, he can qualify for refugee status. But if he gets here 1 minute and 1 second after that, they're fucked.
Jeez.
There's no possibility for them to get refugee status.
Yeah.
And that is the same way of how we think of this empathy. And I think it is easier for the average American to read this book and it's like, oh, a kid, I feel so terrible for this kid. But had I been a 22-year-old, I think the empathy would be a little less. So I'm just trying to shift
Right.
that and be aware of that as well.
Well, I mean, just an absolute towering achievement. Like, how did you get into I mean, how did you get into the 9-year-old mindset? Like, there, there are references before you leave El Salvador, just, Star Wars and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you're thinking about what the US is like. And would you say palomitas in El Salvador?
Okay.
Yeah, you'd be eating, popcorn at the movie theater in the US and air conditioned and, Pio Pio Pio, that the kids song, right? And you're seeing the people like that, and you name the cacti, what, Skinny and Pokey or something like that, right?
Yeah.
It's just like you do such an incredible job like getting us into the mindset of a 9-year-old. How did you do that?
Um,
In one word, not
yeah. In a to keep it short, this has also been my attempt at rescuing a childhood that was taken away from me.
Hmm.
Um, in if you talk to my closest friends, they all have hinted at this, and it has taken me years for me to actually acknowledge that I am very childlike. I'm very like I am the type of person who they if I've never looked at a plant, I like go and like take a leaf and like smell it, and because I've never seen it, I want to know what it
Sure,
smells like and,
sure.
what it is. Um, I would stay in that same bush and look for insects, things like that that I think
Mhm.
are perhaps um, unique to me because I went through something that really stopped my childhood
Yeah,
from growing.
yeah.
The moment that I tried my first cigarette, days after my grandpa leaves and I'm truly solito by myself, I think that was the beginning of the end of my childhood.
Mm.
Um, and so writing and really going back and really trying to put myself in that mindset, which subconsciously other people tell me that have stayed with me, but really acknowledging it and heightening it has actually been healing.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
have I've rescued aspects of myself that I had shunned or forgotten about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Man, so so cool that it's been helpful and healthful for you, because it's just such a great read. So before you go to El Salvador, we get to know about growing up in a small fishing town. And is it pronounced Mali?
Sure.
Your tia? How is that
Yeah.
short for something, or
Marling.
Marlene?
Uh-huh.
Okay. So she's 23. She's like a big sister. You kind of you're 9 at the time, and she's great for you, but she's not mom, right? You're with your
Mm-hmm.
abuelos, they're great, you love them, but they're not mom, they're not dad. And so you're excited about going to the States, hoping to get there. You say goodbye to your friends, you give them the ceremonial toy and everything like that. And then Don Dago,
Mm-hmm.
right? So he's around a lot, and he's kind of seems to be a friend of your grandpa. You seem like you have some bonding with your grandpa though on the way to like the next stop as you begin the journey. What was that like bonding experience like, and having to say goodbye?
Um, in a lot of ways, he he really helped me. He gave me the tools that I needed to survive.
Mm.
You know, because reading, I chose an epigraph that you just read from The Body Keeps the Score, because it took me reading that book to realize that early on, I think it's chapter like 3, there's a checklist of people who have suffered a childhood trauma
Mm.
and how that is enacted in their psyche.
Like literal
And one of
people, or like a archetype,
uh, literal people,
like
and
list
like
of
there's
names.
there's
Okay.
a checklist that
Okay.
you can, like, clinically speaking, if you check at least more than 7 of them, you have
Mm.
had childhood trauma.
Right, right, right,
I
right.
forget the name.
Aces, I think.
Yeah,
Adverse. We talk about that a lot in education. Adverse childhood experiences, some of that effect.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah. And I had like 9, and
Mm.
and and one of them, the one that really was like, oh shit, was that these children have trouble or could have trouble being potty trained or learning basic things,
Mhm.
like tying your shoes, which for me, I refused to learn to tie my shoes, even though I was a kid who was the valedictorian and I shook the president's hand because I was smart.
Mhm.
And I still didn't, I wasn't potty trained. I refused to. And for these children, and now I'm talking about myself, but also clinically speaking,
Mhm.
they refuse this because they have attached that role to their parent that is now gone. My mom was potty training me when she left. And
Mhm.
so I refused to do that. What my grandpa did during those 2 weeks that we were together, everybody knew that I wasn't potty trained. I would always like poop behind the outhouse and like cover it with leaves. And so he made sure that he was gonna be there and like literally on the other side of the door.
Mhm.
So perhaps the best thing that my grandpa did in order for me not to be a weird kid that could be a nuisance for the rest of the trip was for him to get me comfortable pooping in on the toilet. So there's that. And he gained that trust by telling me stories. And but he was an alcoholic. I was scared of him.
Right.
And he really, in hindsight, he did the impossible. He not only made me feel comfortable, but I looked forward to hearing his stories. And he also helped me get potty trained. And he also introduced or reintroduced the idea of cadejo, that
Mm.
I was going to have this like mythical dog protecting me. And as a little 9-year old, that just gave me the confidence that I needed to, I think, survive.
A
So
lot.
the unspoken hero here is my grandpa, is what I'm trying
Right.
to say.
Right. So I mean, a
Which
lot of
is like,
times, right?
yeah, yeah.
No, I was gonna say a lot of times, right? I mean, you're whispering cadejo, cadejito, right? I mean, is it like an alebrije? Like, what's the comparison to that?
What's an alebrije?
Like, an alebrije. I can't even describe it. Like have you seen Coco, la película?
Oh yeah.
Remember, like the dog slash, but it flies. It's got wings.
Oh yeah. Like that I think
This is more like a fox or like a wolf with the hooves and stuff.
it's not that, because I think in that, we are, the Cadejo is like a Mayan, it has Mayan background, and it's literally, and every town thing has different little things, which is why I appreciate.
Okay.
Some towns in Guatemala also believe in the Cadejo, but it's just like this
Mm,
mythical figure that protects you
okay.
when you go out, and you only, you always often says like, oh shit, like I was so shit faced, but I managed to make it home. You have a cadejo
Someone's
protecting you,
looking
and
out for me. Okay.
it's not somebody, it's this mythical thing.
Uh-huh.
And so, and everybody is different, like blah blah blah,
Yeah.
different little things. Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate that. So, so one of the first things that happens is from, I guess from, so crossing into Guatemala, from Guatemala to Oaxaca, Mexico, I guess, right? I mean,
Mhm.
the boat trip. I mean, the description of that. I mean, I'm a nervous flyer. A few times I've been on a boat too. I hate it. I don't get sick necessarily, but I just hate it. And so just the way you describe it is, I wish it were fiction. It'd be, great reading, but unfortunately it was true life. The way you describe the stories, I'm so interested in, and I forget the exact name you gave him, but the one guy who basically goes crazy,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, would he have jumped into the water if people didn't stop him? Like, and just drowned?
uh he was so afraid of drowning that I think, yeah, I think that's why we stopped. And that was the scariest. And there were a lot of scary moments, but for me, I think
Uh,
because it was the very first,
yeah,
like I've never forgotten that, man.
right.
Um, and as a little kid, it was, it reminded me weirdly, and I don't know if I mentioned this or I equate the two, but it reminded me of my grandpa coming home drunk
Mm,
and just like breaking things.
yeah.
Um, it was different because my grandpa was more angry to this grown man who was, um, big, And so it was hard for the other men around him to like control him.
Right.
But he just became a kid. And
Mm-hmm.
as a kid, I was like, oh, I thought that was my role, my role in this boat.
Mm-hmm.
And that just completely freaked me out.
There's some extra scary about an adult getting scared, right? I mean,
Yeah.
and so yeah,
Yeah.
for the reader, it's a secondhand scare for sure. Um, so the family that kind of the family in quotes that takes shape is Marcelo, who's from the same town. He's supposed to take care of. He's kind of like, I guess you might say Cholo-ish.
Nah, I don't. Yeah. Uh, I wouldn't use that word. Um, he's just, you know, a refugee who is struggling and has been sent back to El Salvador and has a very tough exterior.
Very tough exterior. Like in the U.S., in other words, he maybe took on some of that toughness, but
Mm-hmm.
but it maybe wasn't him.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it wasn't him. So he's from the same town, right?
Yeah.
And so he was, grandpa was kind of like, hey, he's going to take care of you. And he's back and forth. There are times where he shows warmth and a lot of times where he doesn't. There's Chele. Does Chele like the same as like Gabacho? Does it mean like
Yeah.
white guy?
Yeah.
White,
Yeah.
right? Chino. And then Patricia and Carlo. Patricia is whether it's the right name or not, but it's the same name as your mom. And so
Mm-hmm.
there's this buy-in for sure. I said Carlo, sorry, Carla. Um, and by the end of the book, of course, there's a real family for sure. As you go through one of the trips, right? And this is where it's in the before, you guys are stopped on the bus. You run off of it. You have to walk. Later, when there's all this craziness and there's people are sleeping, Marcelo just leaves. He's out.
Mm-hmm.
And what I appreciate is that you there's a human heart and we have empathy, and that you could easily have said, I hate that guy, he's the worst, he's terrible, what a ladrón, this and that, but you wished him well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we get as much as we can, not having gone through the experiences. We get that bond that's created throughout all the incredible experiences you have. The desert. Have you read Luis Alberto Urrea?
Yeah. The Devil's Highway. But on the Marcelo point, you know, again, this is the thing. Like you're surviving. You're trying to survive. I have long forgiven Marcelo because if I were to be put in the exact same place,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you recognize that either, I don't know, there could have been many reasons. Either he didn't have the money to pay, um,
Right.
or he knew that these people, as a kid, I completely trusted the Coyotes. Him having done this trip before was the only person whether he really knew where the Coyotes were good, whether
Mm-hmm.
they were actually gonna deliver, which is also you always don't know.
Mm.
And so if you speak English, which he did, and if you think that you can survive and know the roads and where you are, I would have done the same thing.
Huh.
You
Yeah.
know, and like because you're all in survival. You're
Mm-hmm.
not a team per se, not with all these other people.
Sure.
Not if you're an adult, you're not.
Yeah.
Um, which is why this is such a complicated issue, and why again going back to the survivor word, that's why
Mm-hmm.
it's more fitting.
No doubt about it. There was charity along the journey. There were the nuns in Mexico who gave it was like a soup kitchen or something you might call it in the United States, right? It was a place where
Mm-hmm.
the food and the dignity of having your own bathroom and a toilet, even though it was crowded, right? And you described it,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't the cleanest of all, but just the fact that the food was plentiful, was able to let you relax. And um, when you were talking about like with Marcelo and the Coyotes, again, like you said, how can anyone who has not done the experience write about it as well as someone who has? Sounds so obvious, right? But the way that you describe the Coyotes, right? You always read about them and they're either just evil and they're trying to screw everybody over, or I guess you read one who's like an angel, but they're humans and I believe they have good intentions. They get injured, they hurt their ankles, they plan as best they can, but there's a lot of unplanned things that happen, right?
Mhm.
Was that something, like you said, you trusted them? Do you have a different view of the idea of the coyote as you get older, or is it like most of them were there to help and sure they got to make money, but survival mode?
Um, you know, and again, I live at the U.S. Mexico border still. You know, I'm in Tucson.
Mm-hmm.
I volunteer whenever I can with Salvavision,
Oh, good for you. It's beautiful.
and there's an albergue uh, on the other side.
Uh,
And what I can say is that the world that I described in 1999 surely doesn't exist anymore.
hmm.
Um, Things have changed.
Oh yeah.
Um, Back then, when I did this, the cartels hadn't really figured out that they can make money from
Hmm.
human beings.
Hmm.
Now they have figured that one out, and so I can only speak to the world that I know.
Hmm.
And in 1999, surely there were people who were polleros, coyotes, who really thought sincerely that they were helping people, which they were.
Hmm.
You know, they are. This
Hmm.
is like any market, a job is there and you take it. And
Hmm.
if you want to be good at your job, you do it the best that you can in
Sure.
order to make more money. And it's just another economy.
Hmm.
And that's in 1999, there were certainly good people getting people across as
Hmm.
safely as they could,
Hmm.
as safely as they knew how.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, without ruining the ending, so to speak, I mean, people can figure out, some of it, most of it, but there was a third time. What was it? La tercera vez es vencida, algo así. Was the
Mm-hmm.
saying, right? Is that basically third time's a charm,
Yeah.
right? But there's again that bond with family, and I'm wondering so much, and I hope that you have, or I hope that you will. Towards the end of the book, you say, I wrote this book in many ways to be able to get in touch with Chino again, with Patricia, with Carla. Have you any inroads? Have you had any emails or Facebook messages or anything?
No. And I do have to say it's the most asked question,
Yeah,
on the road. Um, I've done a lot of events, a lot of interviews, and no, sadly, not yet.
not yet.
I, my wife is very sure that it will happen.
Yes.
I've also had offers from headhunters who have offered their
Mm,
services pro bono, which I'm still
pro
thinking about
bono.
it. Yeah, they're like
Okay.
they really. I think everybody is attached to them as
Yeah.
I am as well.
Hmm.
So we'll see. But if that does ever happen, I would post it on Instagram,
Yeah.
let people know.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, it has not happened yet. Yeah, nothing.
What a beautiful thing that would be, and we're hoping for sure that happens. Chino is 19. It's not like he's a fully formed adult. I mean, I could see him, like you talk about, his survival mode. I could see him being like, "Who's this little kid? They're not my real family." But
Mhm.
he came back for you, right? I mean, literally and figuratively, he came back for you, and beautiful thing, the way that he would reassure you and all kinds of things like that. We'll end with this, I think. Tell us a little bit about UndocuPoets. I had the pleasure to, it was a virtual, but I got to do an open mic with Marcelo Hernandez
Yeah,
Castillo.
yeah.
I
It's
know
like
you are two of the only, or two of the kind
two
of
of
the
three.
founders, two of three.
Yeah, the
Remind me of the third one, please.
uh, Christopher Loma Soto,
Okay.
whose
Oh yeah,
book
yeah.
just came out from Copper Canyon, Diaries of a Terrorist. And I think, yeah, only Marcelo has stayed on, but it's an organization that every year it's open for submissions and you win. I think it's at $600 or $1,000. I don't know.
Mhm.
I've stepped back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you can still submit to it. And the only criteria is that if you have been undocumented before, which doesn't mean that you can't apply now if you have a green card,
I see.
or
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
and anybody who has been undocumented at one point of their time in the United States can apply for this. And what I will say about that is that um, you would think that the publishing world in my point of view, because poets are so the vanguard of left-leaning thought throughout the world,
Ooh,
that
I
in
like
this
that.
country that in this country would be the same.
Hmm.
And so this quote unquote movement, which wasn't, it was just sending emails and asking people why they had this weird must be US born or must have US citizenship to poetry contest, which to me doesn't make sense.
Sure.
Well, on the other end, a lot of these awards do the same thing as well. They just don't advertise it.
Okay.
I would just say that,
Yeah.
most prominently the National Book Award, the Pulitzer, which,
Yeah.
there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, and I don't
Okay.
understand why being born or having U.S. citizenship, which I still don't have, are still requirements for things in 2022. I don't get it.
2022.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, thank you so much for writing the book. Thanks for your advocacy. You continued work. You talk about working on the border. There's so much important work to be done there. And the book is, one of one. The book is one of two. I mean, it's such a rare, unique, particular greatness. And like I said, I'm just absolutely in awe about the way that you do the stream of consciousness, the, writing from a 9-year-old's point of view, but not, like dumbing it down or anything like that. We really do see through your eyes. I know it was like a cathartic experience and painful and happy and all that. So maybe you're just like taking a break, but I'd love to know maybe what's coming up. What are you working on for the future? Solita Parte Dos.
Well, eventually I do want to write about what happens after, and going against the idea. I think you touched upon it a little bit of, on paper, you could really say like, oh, this immigrant is one of the good ones. But actually, let me tell you about my struggles in middle school and high school, and even college. So that's what's coming.
Yeah. Oh man. So looking forward to it. I'll read anything that you put down on paper or that you put it up electronically. And just a pleasure to be able to get into your mindset. And I tell my students like, hey, there.
Kitty wanted to make an appearance.
¿Cómo se llama?
Loca.
The I tell my students like this idea of, why do we got to know who the Kardashians are dating and all these celebrities, what they're doing? Like the real artists are the writers, the poets, the creative people. And so, it just, for me, talking to someone like you is like, talking to Tom Cruise, so just been a pleasure.
Jumping out of a plane.
Right? Just been a pleasure getting inside your mindset, and wish you great luck in the future, and maybe we can meet in real life down the road one of these days.
Yeah, definitely.
Appreciate so much your time.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure,
Thank you.
And thank you for